Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, Bob Prisbillo, George Stoya here. A unpleasant time to be on the Oklahoma basketball beat, as everything that literally, I think when we talked about the Hoops, we did the Hoops report last week, Bob. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page as well. There was like a 95% chance Oklahoma was going to be in the NCAA tournament. There was that 5% chance, and it was going to have to be one of those situations that every single little thing went against Oklahoma, and that's what happened. As Sunday night, Oklahoma does not hear their name announced during the NCAA selection show, the first team out of the NCAA tournament, and I don't think it has been any easier over the last, 12 hours or so since the end of the selection show on Sunday night, that the reality is Oklahoma's not going to the NCAA tournament, and it's a conversation to be had just about everything, and we'll get into everything right now, but just flat out shocked that Oklahoma's left in this spot today.
Absolutely stunned. We said it all the last month. Get to 20 and you're in. And I, still firmly believe they did everything that was necessary to try to reach the tournament. We get to Saturday, and you had all these, dominoes that had to fall in one way. Every single thing between North Carolina State, between Oregon, and then going back to like Thursday and Friday with teams like Dayton and Florida Atlantic losing their conference tournaments. Like every single piece that could go in a negative way went in that direction. And I know, like, we recorded this before Kansas City. And so then we knew what the talking points were going into the weekend. Porter Moser saying we were 18-6 at full strength. That fell on deaf ears because no one brought that up the entire weekend. All they saw was 2-6 in their final 8, and including some not as competitive couple of final games at Texas against TCU, where no one looked to really see who was on the court at the time and just saw the final score and decided, well, this isn't a team even worth trying to fight for.
A far cry from, I think the feeling in leaving the Lloyd Noble Center that Tuesday night against Cincinnati when you got to that 20-win mark and you thought, okay, I think everything is going to kind of take care of itself. You're going to be in the NCAA tournament field. You had never really been on on the bubble, you'd never really been on the outside looking in, going into the final weekend. And then you have New Mexico winning the Mountain West. You had Duquesne winning the A-10. NC State winning 5 games in a row in the ACC tournament to get Kevin Keats from basically on the hot seat going into
getting an extension
ACC tournament to triggering a 2-year contract extension. Oregon, winning the Pac-12, UAB winning the American. It is what it is. Oklahoma's not going to the NCAA tournament now, George, and it seems like it's fun. I guess, in a way, to have this conversation, but it's a failure of a basketball season for Oklahoma and Porter Moser.
It is, and I think that when you look at it, two things can be true at the same time. OU deserved to be in. I mean, I think you look at some of the teams that got in over Oklahoma, Virginia,
Michigan State.
Yes, those two are the clear ones that you say, man, you look at the metrics, and OU, it has better metrics than almost every category of those two teams. At the same time, OU did have opportunities this season to not even be on the bubble, right? You look back at the Texas Tech game, the Texas game, Kansas at home, the TCU game, and I get it. They had injuries and those sorts of things, but they had chances to solidify themselves,
right? And not leave it in the committee's hands.
Exactly. And so I think that that's the part that you look at it. And I think you can also have different discussions, and I'm sure we'll get into larger picture of the program here in a little bit, but you can talk about this team and why they deserve to be in, and then you can talk about, the 3 years under Porter Moser, they haven't been able to get into the tournament. And I get it. It was really close the first year, and it was even closer this year. But at the end of the day, it's disappointing and it's embarrassing for the program to be sitting in this position. And I'm sure we'll get into the arena stuff later, but it sucks and people are pissed off. Yeah. I know all of our mentions are just a hellscape right now.
I don't think that anybody is disagreeing and saying that you shouldn't be mad about it. You should be mad about it. I do think that the conversation at hand is somewhat interesting because if you just would have won one more game, they were one game shy of getting the NCAA tournament. You had 4 or 5 opportunities. The Texas week, that was kind of the beginning of the end in terms of what was rather poor play down the stretch.
Well, they were 18-6, 6-5. They'd beat BYU and they won the first round of Bedlam.
Right.
And they were sitting pretty. And the game that's going to stick in your craw now is going to be Houston.
Sure.
Because that was if you take out Texas Tech, because by far, you're up 68-59 with
9-point lead,
with
8 minutes
to
left.
go, and you blow that
all
one.
the missed free throws and all
Yes.
that. I mean, you're literally
that's
talking about
Houston.
one game.
Exactly.
If you're just able to get one of those games, now they didn't, and I think that's where the bigger conversation comes into. This is the third year in a row now that Porter Moser has missed the NCAA tournament. I think that, you talk about a guy that's going to be on the hot seat. I don't think they're going to make any type of move this year.
Nope.
But you do enter into your first year into the SEC where things have to change. Like this program cannot go a fourth year without making the NCAA tournament, gentlemen.
Yeah, and one of the problems they had with this season, and because obviously they got docked for the non-conference strength of schedule, totally understand that, is that those wins just never materialized.
Right.
They never panned out and became the big wins that we thought they were in November and December. When you look at USC, who was ranked at the time, doesn't even get to 500 for the entire season. You beat Iowa, who was knocking on the door. They get into the NIT, and same with Providence. But Arkansas never turned it around like we thought they would.
Providence really wasn't
Yeah,
as
think
good
of
of
just
a win.
one of those. Think of just one of those four teams: Providence, Arkansas, USC, or Iowa made the NCAA tournament. OU's in.
Because three of those are on neutral courts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe Providence doesn't get the bump up because it was at home. But, I mean, you went to the neutral setting and took out the Hawkeyes, the Trojans. Tulsa is considered a neutral setting, and for the most part, it's still an Arkansas home game, and you get that one. And so, yeah, you just needed one of those teams to end up, because as we know, you didn't have the bad loss the entire year. And it's something OU mentioned Friday. Like, we need to put this out there. Houston, Connecticut, Purdue, Auburn, and OU. The only 5 teams that were undefeated in quad 2, 3, 4 games. It just didn't matter.
How surprised were you when the news comes out? And, I think the reality of just how quickly this thing changed was it was almost kind of impressive to watch from afar to find out that not only you at 5 o'clock still hoping that you get into the NCAA tournament, by about 5:15 after BYU's name was on the 6th line, and then you saw Virginia in one of the playing games, I think the reality started setting in. Like, they might not hear their name called. By 8:30, your season's over when you decline to go into the NIT. Right, wrong. I don't have a problem with it.
I didn't have, because we were there 2 years ago.
Sure, St. Bonaventure experience.
And it was the second round and losing to the Bonnies, but that didn't lead to anything. People hit the portal. It's not like that led to the camaraderie or the young guys got better. Like, CJ Nolan didn't become better because of playing in that tournament. He wasn't that great as a sophomore, and he left in the portal. So I don't actually have a problem with it, especially if Porter was just trying to pump up this, like, the resume by saying Rivaldo Soares, John Hughley, Javion McCollum were all going to be ready for sure for the tournament. If they weren't all, like, guaranteed it,
right,
and they're actually still pretty hurt, you weren't going to make those guys go through an NIT run.
Also, who gives a shit
Yeah,
about the
I think that there's a lot.
It's
I
just
think
like,
there's a lot of that.
I
understand the idea, though, of getting back out there. I know Tom Crean went on that big
I think-
spiel. It is funny, in Tom Crean's final year at Indiana, they opted out of the NIT. I think it is what it is.
Well, I just think it's
NIT also an ESPN product, so you
Yeah.
can breathe into that.
You would love
however
if
you may.
Caden Cooper got a chance, but
if you had like a super young team that you wanted to get experience, or you were a first-year head coach, or like it was Porter's first year.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe somewhat valuable to keep playing. But in this scenario where you get your heart totally broken to not make the tournament, and you've got a pretty veteran team, like I just don't.
because that's not how the game works now. If this
Yeah.
is 10 years ago, you're the first team out, you're pissed. You come back next year, your whole core is intact, and you're ready to show why it was a mistake. Now it's, well, let's just go hit the portal.
Yeah, you're better off spending your time talking to either trying to keep your guys from going in the portal or going after whoever's in the portal already.
So let's talk about that. It's now one of the biggest stories in college basketball, just in terms of the NCAA transfer portal. has opened, which, right or wrong, it's pretty stupid in my opinion that it's already open. But you've seen the influx of names. Now it's about for Porter Moser, who will be heading into a fourth year. We would probably, I think it maybe not guaranteed, but I think that it doesn't seem like OU's going to be making a move at head coach. So with that in mind, you have to retain some of these guys coming back for next year's team. You had the 3 guys that have graduated, extended their eligibility, or exhausted their eligibility. Everybody else, though, has a chance to come back. What's your just kind of early thoughts on the retention of players and then Oklahoma's positioning in the transfer portal?
If name, image, likeness is truly better for OU this year, then they can keep Javion McCollum and Jalen Moore. It just we go back like five years ago. Both of those guys are in the NBA draft. They would just say, all right, I'm going to bet on myself, especially someone like Moore, who kind of had that breakout season and his athletic ability. It's like, I'm going to try for it. But now it'd be, well, if you've got the NIL package that's ready to keep them in, I think you could get those guys to stay. And we'll find out if that's what they do. I think we know there's going to be some defections. And I think what happened last spring, finally, because I think Porter Moser and Brent Venables, to a certain extent, have fought this. Like, no, like, stay. We want you to stay. But when Jalen Hill left, I think that broke Moser in a way.
Yeah.
Because that was his dude. He'd poured all this effort into getting Jalen Hill to be a much better player in the 2 years that Porter was here. And when Jalen Hill left for UNLV, kind of like at the last second, I think that opened the eyes to Moser that you just have to expect the unexpected at all times when it comes to the portal. So you look at guys that stayed last year, like Los Uzan, Otega Owe. I'm not sure I see either one of those guys coming back. I think if you can keep one between Javion and Los, you've done the job. But I just think there isn't a name that would, maybe outside of Godwin. If Sam Godwin hit the portal, I would be incredibly shocked. But you look at like a Caden Cooper and Jacob Cole. Cole was a redshirt. Cooper was the guy that we all talked about. Why isn't he playing? Like, none of these names at all would surprise me.
Gosh.
It paints for a pretty curious picture in Norman in terms of what the basketball program is. And I think that's where you take a step back and you kind of look at the big picture right now. And it's not good. Like, the facilities stink. I think the fan support stinks in general. And every reason so, because they're not a very good team on the court. It paints a pretty rough picture as you're making this transition into the SEC, gentlemen.
Yeah, and I think that you have to kind of start with the arena discussion. And I know this is just talking in circles when we get to the arena discussion, but someone tweeted me yesterday and was just like, well, how do you generate excitement for this program right now? And I just said, well, you could start by just announcing a new arena. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying the current arena plan is a good plan. I don't think it is, but it is the only plan. I'm also not saying that a new arena is suddenly going to win OU more basketball games. Sure. But I do think that
there are so many problems. It's like it's a little bit of everything that each person throws out there. It's like, yeah, it's that. It's like it's not going to be an overnight fix.
No, but I do think that a new arena could maybe help in recruitment. Maybe you do get a player that wants to come play in a nice new facility. Maybe you get more fans to show up to games. I don't know. I think winning ultimately is what gets you people to the stands, but it would at least give you some excitement. I think Porter could build on some of that. I know it seems like every time he has a chance to speak about it, he speaks his mind about it. And so I think that's something that can be talked about, but I think ultimately they need more NIL money, like Bob said, because they have to be able to go out and get, probably a big man. I mean, if they can keep McCollum and Moore, that's a good start, but can you go out and get a Brandon Garrison? Probably not him, but maybe somebody like him, because I think that's where their biggest need is. But, I mean, I just...
That seems to be one of the biggest problems right now, too, is the fact that there are so many different guys within the portal that you're every year now having to go back to the portal and try to refigure a roster or restructure a roster. It's not sustainable in a way.
Well, and that's why it's like everybody says, well, fire Porter Moser. And I'm on the train of I don't think he needs to be fired. But if all these guys enter the portal, I don't know. Maybe you do start from scratch and just hire a whole new coaching staff. I don't know.
And that's like hypothetically, say if you did that, that's where you get into the conversation. How desirable is this job, knowing that the next coach is going to inherit the same effing problems that Porter Moser's having to go through right now?
I mean, nothing's really going to change there. And I didn't mention John Hughley. I think he'll come back. I'm trying to think of guys that earned the right to say I should be looking elsewhere. And for me, that's Javion and Jalen. Everyone else played at a level where you say, well, if you want to hit the portal, what do you think you did this season?
Sure.
That's going to put you in a better position.
And that gets into the conversation of development. Yep. Like, Otega Owe regressed this year. Los Uzon, for the most part, he might have been better, but it's just a tick better than what he was as a freshman.
And my expectations they changed for Los midway through the season, because we going in to this year, there were the people that actually cover the NBA draft saying, no, he's not a lottery guy, but he could be a first rounder after this season. And then you're like, no, Los isn't that guy. And then everything for me, like if Los was upset, I'm just putting words in his mouth, or I'm kind of speaking out of turn.
Speculating.
Yeah, if he was upset that Javion became more of the number one guy. When you played Cincinnati and Javion's out, and Los played maybe the worst game we've ever seen from someone who can play at an elite level, not just the scrub off the bench being thrown into a spot they weren't ready for. Your team captain and going like
it was Max Klanchek that saved their ass.
Going like 1 for 9, fouling out, fouls 25 feet away from the basket, hitting side to backboard on shots he usually makes. That was the game that said, if you're going to hit the portal, you better burn this film.
Yeah. It's a rough conversation to have, and I think that what makes it even rougher to have this conversation, or more tough to have this conversation, is knowing that if you just would have heard your name called, while it would have glossed over a lot of problems, it would have made you feel a little bit better about the direction everything is going. But the flip side of that is it didn't happen, and now you're staring at a third consecutive season. I believe Porter Moser is the first coach since Dave Bliss to go 3 consecutive seasons without making the NCAA tournament. And at the end of the day, like you said, George, you're either in or you're out, and you're out, and that means that this is a failure of a season.
Yeah, and
even despite some of the steps that they made, like just getting over the finish line in some of these games in the second half, something they hadn't done in the first 2 years. The totality of it is they failed. They didn't get to the NCAA tournament. They didn't meet the goal that they set at the beginning of the year.
And that should be the bar at Oklahoma. And I know I've been very critical of the basketball program this year, but historically this is an average to slightly above average program in a lot of aspects. And the bar, the minimum, should be making the NCAA tournament. And I understand this year it was a crazy way that they got bounced. I mean, you guys said it. Going into the weekend, they weren't even on the bubble. And so it's, crazy circumstances. But like I said earlier, you also put yourself in that position. And I don't know. It's just, it's crazy. And I think the bottom line, too, is this. At Oklahoma, whether it's the fans or the administration, the bottom line is, in a week, a lot of people aren't going to care anymore, because that's where basketball falls right now, is that it's just a secondary or maybe even a third option in a lot of people's minds, whether it's the fans who right now are complaining about the basketball program and only care about it for the months of February and March every single year, or the administration that has failed to invest in it the last 20 years. People don't give a shit about basketball at Oklahoma, and that's why they're sitting in this position that they haven't been in since the 70s.
That's really depressing, but it's very true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I do think that it's going to be an interesting offseason. You talk about the retention. You talk about what's going to happen in the portal.
Look at assistant coaches, too. Can they keep these guys? They've always had to restock.
It's been rebuilding every year.
It's been some guys leave. All of them have left for better jobs.
Let me ask you this, Bob.
We can't say that's bad.
We talk about, I just went on a little rant there about the basketball program. What does Porter Moser, I think, wonder about all this? Would he, I know that we talked about the DePaul thing. DePaul's obviously not going to hire him, but there's other openings. Would he look around and be like, man, I can't get it done in Oklahoma. I haven't been, maybe he feels like he hasn't been given all the resources. It's hard to retain players here, whatever it may be. He's not getting the new arena that maybe he was promised. Like, would he be looking elsewhere too?
I mean, if the certain job came up, because I know a lot, we talked last month, if McDermott went from Creighton to the Ohio State. Then obviously Porter Moser would look, Creighton,
Former player,
be
all
a
that.
spot, exact basketball only type of school. But I'm not sure what would really be out there that would pique his interest too much. I mean, the two schools in the last 2 years made a lot of sense for a Catholic boy going back to Chicago, so Notre Dame or DePaul, and now both of those are obviously off the table with the Blue Demons making their hire last week. I think there's, I don't want to say ego, but there's like that determination in Porter's like, I'm going to get this done. I know that I can. I know this will work out. I just have to keep at it, and I just have to keep people believing in me. And that will be obviously the biggest challenge, is from retention with players and staff, and with trying to keep those fans. And that's even what he put in his message. I think that's why he's put it out there in that social media message. That wasn't I thought it might be a little video message or something, but it was, a notes app type of thing, and then with a graphic design around it. But thanking the fans, saying, like, don't give up on us. Don't give up on me. I'll be back for year 4. I hope you guys are too.
I also would say, this is going to sound, I guess it is a shot, but like, how attractive of a candidate is Porter? I mean, I know that.
I think that the star is kind of, I don't know, darkened or whatever.
No, it happens. I mean, we look at Matt Campbell, Iowa State football. Like, sometimes you strike when the iron's hot, and then if you don't, you never know if you're going to reach that level again. And so, we'll see. Maybe the move to the SEC, maybe that gives you a couple more gimmies instead of,
and you look up and the SEC gets as many teams as the Big 12 does into the NCAA tournament, 8-8. I mean, it's not like they're walking into a cakewalk either.
Oh, no. But maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable with a couple of those lower level games, where this one you just felt like every single night you had no idea if you were going to be able to win.
Sure. And the other thing too is you look at, just in terms of what the program is, I get it. I get why fans are so down right now, and I get why people are starting to jump off of, if you haven't already been there, off the Porter Moser train, because of the way that you do lose games, whether it be the Kansas game where you score 4 field goals in the second half, like the aesthetically signing up to go watch something at an already shit arena or on television with Oklahoma, it's not the easiest watch. That's why there was a lot of people when you lose the Houston game. It's like, well, at least you scored 85.
Yeah, it was
looked
fun.
good.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the complaint, is like they're not winning a lot of games, and they're also just not fun to watch.
Right.
Like, they play a different brand of basketball, and that's fine if you're winning. And in 3 years, they just haven't been able to win enough. And so I think that people are just getting tired of that. And some of that, again, is going back to, I think, OU fans, they're not the biggest basketball fans. So that when they turn on the basketball team in January, February, and March, they just want to see fun basketball and a team that can win. And they're not really seeing either of those things. It's tough for them to buy into the program.
It'd be a lot easier, Bob, if you could just point to one thing. It's kind of like we were talking about before we started today, that it'd be a lot easier if you could just point and go, you know what, you change the head coach. I think they're going to be moving in the right direction. There's so many moving pieces right now that it's hard to just pinpoint one thing, and also knowing that it's not complete shit. It's not. They almost made the NCAA tournament. Probably should have, barring what was a historically terrible break in terms of the bid stealing. But it feels like they're like, it's kind of like one of those football teams, like the NFL team that is just good enough to skate by at 8-8 or 9-8 nowadays.
Purgatory, NFL purgatory.
They're in a little bit of college basketball purgatory in a way.
I think something Porter will have to look at, and just in terms of self-evaluation, is going to be pace of play. We saw it in November and December, but then when Big 12 came around, it went away. Mm-hmm. It just would amaze me watching, because I watched so many games this weekend, keeping track of like why this affects OU. Like, I seriously watched way too many that I need to take a little
step in my world for a second.
I need to take a little bit of a break. But these teams, like, if they had a fast break opportunity, used it, took advantage of it, actually tried to make something happen instead of just getting the ball and then slowly bringing it up, dribbling it to death, and then when on the shot clock reaches 10, now trying to make something happen. And so that's got to be ingrained from the start with summer conditioning. You've got to be ready to go all 40 minutes. And I love my Illini. They're scoring 90 points on the regular.
Right.
That's well, I know OU can get there, but they've got to have when they hit conference play. It can't be these like 65 to 60 slogs.
Yeah, they got to get guys that can shoot the basketball. I mean, it's a good thing.
And they need a skilled big man too. You look at Porter's,
sure. And everybody in the country is looking
right.
for that.
Yeah. And I know that's like the
all,
hard.
like
it's an
offensive
obvious,
line in
but
football portal.
They just haven't had that in any of the 3 years, and I think that you saw it improve a little bit this year. Godwin took a step in a lot of ways, but he's not a starting center in the Big 12.
Losing Hughley was
huge.
massive deal for them. And not to say that he was going to be a first-team All-Big 12 guy, but he was at least a body out there that was contributing a little bit, maybe more athletically than somebody like a Sam Godwin could.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Porter tried to stress the 18-6 at full strength. And I think I would need to know deep down that those three were actually going to come back. I didn't feel like it was guaranteed. I know he kept by Friday or Saturday, we're going to be at full strength. We're going to be good to go. I want everyone to know we're going to be at full strength. But what Hughley was trying to go through, because what happens after like a NFL playoff run or an NHL playoff run, you hear what these guys do.
Yeah.
I would love to know what Soares' ankle has gone through in this last month. Like, was there actually anything left in the tank that this team would have had they reached?
I also don't. I mean, I know there's a lot of people on social media criticizing Porter for resting those guys.
Yeah, I don't think it was a rest. It
not-
wasn't
No,
a rest.
That's what I was like. Soares
would've
was
played
carried
if
off
they
the
could've.
court. Yeah, Soares was carried off the court. Hughley's going through a knee injury. Like McCollum's the only one that I'm like, well, but if he has a shoulder problem and can't shoot the ball, like what good is he playing in the game?
Right. Yeah, I think that
I don't think that's
became
a
like
fair criticism.
That somehow became a narrative on social media
really
over
did.
the weekend, especially last night. Well, if they wouldn't have rested, if they could have played, they would have played. I think everybody knows that OU, even going in, was on the bubble, let alone resting guys for something that you didn't know, you couldn't forecast.
You're also like not if you've never played a competitive sport, if you think that those guys were just willingly like, oh yeah, I'm just not going to play. And Porter was all, and you've never been. I don't know if none of us have been coaches, but like Porter is a competitive human. Like he wanted to win the game against TCU.
Sure.
He wasn't just throwing the game.
I mean, he laughed it off when it was asked about going in TCU. The only game I said you go back is like, I don't know if you need to give it your all in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it ultimately didn't matter.
Get people healthy and then be ready for Kansas City to try to make a run. And when Soares was down with 3 minutes to go of what was a blowout loss against the Horns, like, did you just lose your season for something that just wasn't worth it in the moment?
A shocking end to what was an up and down season, and ultimately didn't work out for Oklahoma. They are out of the NCAA tournament, and I think that everything that we have talked about today is going to be rehashed for the next 7 months. It's going to be difficult to sell the program right now, considering where this thing is. And I think that's the biggest question mark to me is how do you rebound from what has been, now 3 years of ultimately a little bit of a failure of a hire. And if they would have got in, we're not saying this, but the reality is you didn't get in.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that needs to happen this offseason, one, you do have again, I know some people don't care about the arena and think it doesn't matter. That is supposed to be somewhat cleared up either this spring or summer at the latest. So that's one thing that maybe can generate some excitement.
And
the other thing is,
are we still at a point where the residents aren't even voting?
Correct. It's city council. It's down to the city council. So that's supposed to happen, I think, soon. I'm trying to track that down here in the next couple of weeks, so we'll try and figure that out. But then I think the bigger thing is, like Bob said, if you can get McCollum to commit to coming back, get a Jalen Moore, John Hughley, some of these guys, Caden Cooper. I think Caden Cooper is a big one.
Yes, he is.
Because fans seem to really love him, even though he's barely played. But like, if you can get someone, a young guy like that, to do that, I think that would be huge. And then I think that if you can go out and maybe get a big splash in the portal to show people, hey, we think we're going to have a good team next year. That's what needs to happen to generate at least some excitement. But I do think, just reading my mentions, fans have lost all hope in Porter Moser, so they have to make the NCAA tournament next year. Like, it is no question about it. It has to happen.
And the thing that, we've talked about in football, it doesn't really matter what you do in November. It doesn't matter what you do in December. And to a certain extent, it's probably not going to matter what you do in January because they've been there before here over the last 3 years. You've got to be able to find a way to play better basketball in February and March and not put yourself ultimately in the spot that they were in at the devices of the NCAA Tournament Committee.
This is back-to-back years of getting someone from the portal and having them learn through the Big 12 grind with Grant Sherfield, now Javion. It's an adjustment. Now, if you can keep Javion for a second year and help him get stronger throughout the course of the summer and the fall, maybe things end up a little bit different, but there's just that harsh reality that when conference play hits, you've got to go to another level, and some of these guys either stayed the same or regressed.
I hope everybody feels better. I certainly don't. I don't think Bob does, nor does George, but very disappointing. Good news for Oklahoma women, though, I guess, in a way. I thought it was a decent seed or a decent draw just in terms of trying to get to that second weekend.
Yes.
You got your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, kind of knows that situation, but headed up to Bloomington, Florida Gulf Coast on Saturday at 3 o'clock. They would play Indiana, the host, in Bloomington on Monday. That's a Saturday-Monday regional.
Yeah, I'm not surprised they dropped to the 5 seed. I know some people are saying, well, they deserved a 4 seed. I mean, they got blown out by Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament in the semifinals. So, and they were already on that, like, the last 4 seed.
Correct.
So it didn't surprise me that they dropped to a 5. I think they kind of got a favorable spot in terms of how they match up with Indiana if they get to that game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know a whole lot about Florida Gulf Coast, but I do think that I'm sure that is a game that they feel like they can win. But if they can get to that Indiana game, Indiana's a team last year. I think they got upset, I want to say either in the first or second round
on their home floor.
On their home floor a year ago, and they've been kind of up and down.
It was one of the
this year.
Cavinder twins, wasn't it? It was
correct. Miami,
I
yes. I think it was in the second round. Miami was an 8 or 9 seed, but it's an Indiana team that I think that they could match up well with. And again, what it comes down for the women's team is how are they shooting the 3 ball? Because when they shoot the 3 ball well, they can play with just about anybody. We've seen that when they went up against Texas and beat them twice. We've seen that throughout their conference play for the most part. But when they're not shooting the ball well, like they did against Iowa State, or they don't play as good a defense, I mean, Iowa State torched them in the Big 12 tournament, then they could also drop a stunner to anybody. So we'll see, but I think that they feel good about that group. And a third straight year of making the tournament for Jenny Baranczyk. They've had no issues there, but the next step for them now is, can they get to the Sweet 16?
And beating South Carolina.
Yeah, they got South Carolina.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Good luck to everybody that's going to try to beat South Carolina over the next couple months or a couple weeks because they're a different cat.
Oh, yeah. But I will say, women's basketball, last year, I think South Carolina came into the tournament undefeated, and everybody thought they were going to run through it. Did they end up losing in the Final Four?
I believe so. And LSU
like
won
that.
the national championship.
LSU
right?
beat Iowa, and obviously Iowa's
because it
phenomenal.
was Iowa that beat. No, that's never mind.
I don't know who beat who in the Final
I'm not
Four.
Charlie Palm or what Cream or whatever.
But I do think the women's bracket's gonna be fun to watch just because I think Caitlin Clark is on a mission.
Yeah.
And she's been obviously phenomenal to watch. And there's also just some big personalities in women's basketball, so it'll be cool to see if Iowa can kind of, because I think everybody's already just penciled in, like we said, South Carolina, but can one of these other 1 or 2 seeds maybe make a run at it? I think it's gonna be kind of fun to watch.
Very good. All right, that's going to do it for the Hoops Report. We'll be back. Good weekend for stickball.
Oh, yeah.
A really good weekend, so that'll actually be kind of fun to be able to talk about. And obviously football, Dunzo this week. Everybody's out on spring break as University of Oklahoma is on spring break. So for George, for Bob, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.